Hello, hello, this is Fear Dragon coming at you with another StarCraft 2 netcast. Today we have another Terran versus Terran between LiquidTaeja and MilleniumForGG from Dreamhack Valencia 2012 Finals. This is game number 5. If you haven't seen game number 1, game number 2, game number 3, or game number 4, please go ahead and check those out by clicking on the annotations below. But if you're still around, I'm going to assume you have, and we're going to go ahead and jump in and introduce these players. Spawning down here in the bottom side of Metropolis, we have the red Terran player representing Team Millennium. It is going to be MilleniumForGG. He is the aggressive Terran that has been showing aggression every single game in the past 4 games, and even in that last game where it went toward that, slightly less aggressive route. He started off by trying to go for a proxy 2x. Now we're going to see if he's going to go for any other kind of crazy shenanigans again. And actually, we do end up seeing some crazy shenanigans going on right there, and I'll come back to that in a second. But give it up for MilleniumForGG. And his opponent spawning up here in the top side of Metropolis as the blue Terran. We have representing Team Liquid. Clearly, the reason why he chose blue is going to be LiquidTaeja. Taeja, one of the strongest Terrans in the world right now, arguably one of the best Terrans in the world right now, and we're going to see what his plan is. He was down 0-2, now he has made a giant comeback, evening up the series to a 2-2 even ace match. And yes, that is the ace match. This is a best of 5 series, and this is going to be the last game one way or another. We're going to see how he decides to play this out. I am so excited, guys, so let's go ahead and jump into it. Now, going back to what MilleniumForGG was doing earlier, is he actually opted to grab this gas geyser first. This is the first thing he did, actually, in this game. And this is going to be really, really interesting to see. And, Taeja is a top-notch player. We're going to see, does he actually know about this? He does know that the gas geyser is going to be there, and he should actually... I feel like he should actually know that that gas geyser was taken relatively early, just because of the fact that it finished up, and he saw that it was going over there, and those workers were mining off of that gas geyser well before that barracks actually finishes up. He can actually see that there's already a factory down, so he should definitely know what is going on, and there's definitely going to be some aggression coming out of 4GG in this game. And in the meanwhile, we see LiquidTaeja going ahead and grabbing the gas geyser of his own, and not actually producing any more Marines. There we actually see finally another Marine being produced, and I feel like LiquidTaeja is definitely going to have to get up some units before he goes ahead and plays too greedy economically. Now he's going to go ahead and throw down this command center, and that's going to mean that he's going to be in a fantastic situation if he can defend against whatever kind of aggression that 4GG is planning on doing. We can see that that starport is going to be coming out with a tech lab already finished, so wow. 4GG going to be going for very fast Banshees. So we can see over here that the starport is halfway done, and it's only 4 minutes and 30 seconds. So he might actually even just be going for cloak. Who knows? Actually, I feel like he's not actually going to have the gas for that cloak, just because he doesn't even have this second gas geyser. But we're going to see how well this works out for him. Now there is a bunker going up for Taeja, and this is exactly what I was talking about. He needs to get up those units and those buildings to be able to defend against whatever kind of aggression that 4GG is going for. And the other thing is he's going to have to prepare some of those, Marines just to be able to defend against that Banshee, as a well-microed Banshee can actually spell doom and disaster for a unprepared Terran player, just because, those Marines do get kind of kited a little bit by a well-microed Banshee. We do actually see 2 Hellions popping out. Just going to be able to do a little bit of poking over here at the front now. One thing that 4GG needs to know about is whether or not there is this expansion over here. Sure, he sees that there is this bunker over here, but he can't be 100% certain that Taeja is not going for something else entirely. As he hasn't even scouted the main base. He doesn't know whether or not Taeja went for those 2 gas geysers early on or not. But meanwhile, we do see that Banshee popping out for 4GG, the expansion going up as well. So as long as he can do a little bit of damage with this Banshee and potentially do a little bit of poking and prodding with these Hellions, and maybe even run by the bunker, although I'm not sure how much I like that idea, as it's going to be a very risky maneuver if he goes for that. He can still come out okay. We can see over here in the unit counting station we have a relatively even worker count, so we're going to see how that changes up. We do see the Marines from Taeja actually very well positioned to try and deal with these Banshees, but the Hellions are actually running straight on through. 2 Hellions do make it through, and all of those Marines from Taeja are dead, but these two Marines are going to be popping out. A Siege Tank coming out as well, and this is going to be able to do some really nice damage to those Hellions. And as well, with these Marines coming in, the Hellions get cleaned up, but the Banshee is still picking away at a couple of those units. 5 kills already, although you do have to keep in mind that some of those were from Marines, but this Viking is going to put an end to that Banshee harassment. There we actually see a really nice play, really nice zoning coming out from LiquidTaeja, able to take out that Banshee with that there Viking. Now we can see over here in the unit counting station, that is 26 to 27 workers, and you know, it might not seem like a big deal right now, but just having that 2 worker lead now, we can see that, you know, Taeja's going to be feeling to be in a pretty good position now, actually up to a 4 or, you know, close to a 3 or 4 worker lead, and you know, he's going to feel pretty comfortable. He also has that siege tank count starting to build up a little bit. You know, he actually did swap that factory back over to the reactor, get out some of those Hellions. So kind of interesting decision. Going to delay some of that siege tank production for just a little while, just sitting on 1 siege tank. But I mean, he does have a pretty nice tech situation right now, and meanwhile 4GG did swap that tech lab onto the factory, so now he can begin some of his siege tank production. He already is sitting on that single siege tank, going to be going for that second siege tank, and even getting siege mode already. So in that sense, I feel like 4GG did come out of this build relatively okay, just because honestly, he's come ahead in tech a little bit further than Taeja. Taeja is slightly behind from that tech path, but he's still doing a little bit better in terms of economy. But ultimately, the game is looking pretty even, and this can definitely go either way. Now, we do actually see a Banshee coming out from LiquidTaeja. He's going to be able to do a little bit of damage, but I don't think he's going to be able to do a whole lot unless 4GG decides to move out. Look at this anti-timing as the Hellions actually pop their way in. 2 Hellions should be able to kill at least 2 or 3 of these SCVs. Not going to be 100% worth it. Actually, we've seen a lot of those shots off over on that siege tank. Going to get picked off very, very quickly. And now the Banshee is going to come back in, but unfortunately for Taeja, actually, those Marines are actually brought back in. The Banshee is just going to go down right over there. So a really nice catch from 4GG and a little bit of miscontrol from Taeja. I feel like Taeja, you know, he kind of forced the entire army of 4GG to get pulled back by bringing in those 2 Hellions. And maybe if he had just done that run by right after that entire army of 4GG had moved out a little bit further across the map, and that Banshee had come in at the same time, if he had been able to have them in that base or that natural at the exact same time, he would have been able to do a lot of damage. But unfortunately, it didn't end up working out. Now we do end up seeing that 4GG going to be pushing across the map without too much fear of any kind of counterattacks, and even has a couple of reinforcing units moving across the map, going to potentially be able to take out this Hellion over there. We do actually end up seeing the Vikings pretty high in that count in comparison to Taeja's, but Taeja does not actually have siege mode finished up yet, and that could actually be a terrible, terrible position for him unless he is very, very careful. He has controlled this so well right now, as I think that this siege, oh my god, the tech lab is actually under fire as it is in range of that siege tank. Siege mode will finish up. This is going to very much cut in to that siege tank production, as you know, once he loses that tech lab, that's going to mean no more siege tanks going to be able to be produced for LiquidTaeja. We do actually see the Vikings landing, doing a little bit of extra damage, and actually going to be able to potentially do some really nice damage over to that factory. You're going to lower it down to potentially burning. No, not going to actually burn it down, but you know, still going to be in a very, very nice strategic position. As we can see, these siege tanks are just going to be able to do so much damage. Even going to get in range of the bunker now. As with these Vikings, he just has such good air control, and he has, with air control comes that vision. When you have these siege tank versus siege tank battles, you need that vision so desperately, so badly. And you know, actually 4GG being able to snipe off a tech lab really, really showing to hurt Taeja now. But actually, Taeja moving in with a couple of Marines and Marauders, trying to get that snipe down on that siege tank. It might actually be able to get one of them, but at what cost? Does actually get the vision also to start sniping off that second siege tank. Gets it, and oh my god, that actually might be exactly what LiquidTaeja needed now. Now LiquidTaeja holding that siege tank advantage, and now he should be able to defend relatively well, as he still has a pretty decent number of Marines and that Marauder over there to defend his front, and still has 3 siege tanks of his own. He could actually move up a little bit further, try and start picking off some of the siege tanks of 4GG. He has to be so careful, and we do actually end up seeing 4GG try to move in, but actually under fire by those siege tanks, cannot move in very much further. Now we do actually end up seeing back in the home base of 4GG just making units out of these 3 factories and that starport, just going to be going all out mech at this point, and really these Marines are just going to be just a temporary thing right now. As long as they last, they will be able to help out, but he's not going to be reproducing them much. In the meanwhile, we see Taeja actually producing a lot of Marines, a lot of Marauders, and actually landed Vikings going after LiquidTaeja's tanks. And I'm not sure, he does actually get that siege tank, but was it worth it, as he did basically throw away his Viking account, as, you know, he is down to just one Viking now over with this little base over here, and doesn't look like he's actually going to be producing a whole lot more. Does actually have two about to pop, but you know, at the same time, I guess Taeja is not really opting to make any of those Vikings, just going ahead and making medevacs and just going to supplement his army with a lot of Marines. So now we see Taeja going for that very biocentric style of play versus 4GG going for that mech style of play. And, you know, 4GG does not really have any kind of upgrades on his units just quite yet. As we can see, he's not even beginning to research any of that, just going ahead and grabbing that third command center. You know, we see that Taeja does have that third command center already finished up, going ahead and landing it. And in the meanwhile, we see his upgrades are actually going pretty well. He does have that +1 weapons on his Marines and does not actually have anything on his siege tanks just quite yet, but +1 weapons is researching on those, as well as having the +1 infantry armor. Definitely going to be helping him out, and especially when it comes to those big engagements, having that upgrade advantage is just so key. Making the most of all the units that you have makes it okay if you have a few less units, but I'm really curious to see how exactly Taeja is going to follow this up. As you can see, he is continuing to produce these Marauders. It does still have a lot of those siege tanks. And, you know, his army is looking very scary. Look at this. He has quite a few of those medevacs. Going to have the potential for dropping over here in the main and just trying to do some nice harassment. Does have those siege tanks already up, so he can also start doing some nice siege up positioning to try and deal some good damage over to 4GG's army and just stop him from being able to advance very easily. But at the same time, look at the siege tank count coming out from 4GG, as well as Viking count. It's going to be very difficult for Taeja to go into this with a direct engagement. As you know, even with that concussive shells, stim, combat shields, all of that stuff finishing up, it's going to be so difficult. We do actually see quite a few of the Hellions caught a little bit off guard. The siege tanks now sieging up, but look at that really nice split from LiquidTaeja, and he's actually going to be able to clean up all the Hellions, and with all the Hellions cleaned up, that does mean he can run in these Marauders and start picking off some of those tanks. And now, with all of those tanks actually picked up, wow, he actually did an amazing amount of damage with that, actually being able to pick off a lot of those tanks. But look at this, the Vikings coming into use right now, picking off those remaining 3 or 2 siege tanks coming out from LiquidTaeja. So wow, just a complete exchanging of armies over there. But one thing I do want to say is that having that siege tank count reset for LiquidTaeja is going to be very rough, as you can even see over here. And even though he is going to be able to start reproducing those Marines and Marauders very quickly, he has to deal with that siege tank count of 4GG right now, as he still has a good number of siege tanks. He's also going to be producing a lot of Hellions very quickly, and I'm really curious to see how exactly LiquidTaeja is going to go ahead and try and defend, or if he's going to go ahead and just try and put on a little bit of aggression. We do actually see that 4GG is going ahead and retreating, so probably just going to want to defend this third expansion, just because it's going to be so important for him to get that up. He's only just now really started mining from that very heavily. Meanwhile, we can see that Taeja's actually been mining for actually quite a bit of time now, so he's a little bit ahead economically in that sense, just in the sense that he's mined a bit more than his opponent. And, you know, we do end up having LiquidTaeja continuing to just produce Marines and Marauders, not really opting to add on any additional tanks at this point. So kind of interesting. We do actually see just now one or so tanks being produced at a time, but I mean, the main production really is one. Of course, as soon as I say that, he's going to go ahead and start production from that other factory with this tech lab. But, you know, it looks like he's going to feel pretty comfortable just pushing out across the map with this army. And I have to say, this is a very scary army. And, you know, 4GG is going to have to make sure he's in really fantastic positioning just to be able to defend against this army. Just because, you know, again, LiquidTaeja has that very mobile force. He can go ahead and dart over here to this third expansion. Oh, look at this. He's actually going ahead and kill off these destructible rocks. And that's going to give him a really nice positioning. He's going to be able to circumvent so many of these siege tanks. Look at this. At least 2 of these siege tanks are going to be completely unused. These siege tanks are going to be completely unused. These siege tanks are going to be completely unused and out of position. And meanwhile, LiquidTaeja is going to have his entire army able to just move into this third and shut down pretty much all the mining at this expansion. As long as he gets into a good position, we do see he's moving in, he's sniping up a ton of these siege tanks, and now we do see the Hellions starting to move in, and they're going to be able to just some really nice splash damage, but siege tanks from the LiquidTaeja already sieged up, so the Hellions have to be very careful. And look at this, the mining is completely shut down from 4GG, so you know he's basically on effectively 2 mining bases at this point, as long as LiquidTaeja maintains this position. Now, one thing that Taeja has to be very, very careful of is this possibility of just a counterattack. But you have to remember, again, 4GG has that immobile force, so he can afford to do these kind of things and get into this kind of position. And meanwhile, look at this. Taeja actually grouping up an army over here. He might actually be looking to do a flanking position, or even just putting those units over there. As a reminder from game number, I don't actually remember the game number, but that game on Cloud Kingdom where he ended up being so out of position that 4GG just counterattacked, and Taeja is kind of lost because of that. So having these units over here is going to be so smart for LiquidTaeja right now. We do end up seeing that actually 4GG starting to move out a little bit, but actually Taeja, realizing it, just going to go ahead and come in and snipe off some more siege tanks. And look at this. He is in such a great position. I mean, what can 4GG do right now? We do actually see 4GG trying to take out some of that army from LiquidTaeja, but LiquidTaeja being very, very careful with it, bringing it all the way around to just reinforce this position over here, bringing in a couple additional siege tanks. Does have a small little army over here to spot for any kind of counter aggression as well, maintaining control of those watchtowers. Now we see the units are moving into behind that mineral line, just once again doing as much damage as possible, actually loading up a couple of those units into a drop just to be able to get them out. But one of them actually does go down. It's going to actually be a bit of hurtful for LiquidTaeja, as he's just basically trapped in this corner now. So even though he's done a lot of economic damage, he is going to be in such a world of hurt if he ends up losing this entire army completely unfavorably, as it looks like he might actually end up doing, just because 4GG is just completely trapped this army, and Taeja is in a world of trouble now, as he just has to go ahead and try and macro up as big of an army as he can back at home. As we can see, he's starting to build up a little bit of an army, but he needs to build up a big enough army that he will be able to actually defend any kind of big counter push. And we do actually end up seeing 4GG going for said counter push. Just look at this siege tank count. He is sitting up at 14 siege tanks, and you know, even though we do see Taeja does have 11 siege tanks, I mean, a lot of those siege tanks are basically just split up across this map. Look at this. These siege tanks are positioned over here, but look at this. Taeja actually positioned quite a few siege tanks over here. They're going to be completely useless in this battle, as all of these Hellions moving out across the map. And oh my god, dropping down the scan on top of Taeja's army. He's going to know how out of position he is. And now we do see these Marines and Marauders just going to melt to this ginormous Hellion count. What is with this Hellion count? They are not sitting on huge upgrades in comparison to Taeja's army, which is sitting on those 2-2 upgrades, but still, they're going to be in just such massive numbers that I'm not sure if it's going to matter too much. We do end up seeing that Taeja getting a really nice position, and oh my god. Oh, 4GG is actually positioned in not such a great area right now. He wants to move in. He wants to just go for it right now and stop, just because he knows the longer that this game goes, the more production rounds that LiquidTaeja will have. And meanwhile, I mean, 4GG barely any mining, actually. Only mining off 2 mineral patches at this point. So he really is just cannot afford to wait over here, but he can't really afford to move forward just because of this siege tank line set up from Taeja. Because, you know, I mean, going through this choke with this giant army is just going to be so difficult, because he's going to take out so much splash damage, especially with this giant clump of Hellions, this giant clump of siege tanks. It's going to be so rough. But I like the decision making from 4GG, coming over here and saying, hey, you know, I know that there are a couple units from LiquidTaeja out right now that are a little bit vulnerable. I can go ahead and take those out at least. And now we do end up seeing all the siege tanks actually cleaned up by that army of Hellions. And now we see the SCVs trailing along. This is going to be a complete all-in situation from 4GG. It's going to come down to whether or not Taeja can actually defend. He's actually going to be able to take out this mining expansion over here. And oh my god, that Terran command center is about to burn down. He needs to drop a mule or something to save the command center, but no, he just says, just screw it at this point. I mean, he's already all in, and now we see the siege tanks trying to move in, but taking so much damage. He's losing so many siege tanks he cannot afford to lose right now. But we do end up seeing the remainder of the army coming in, trying to do as much damage. He more looks like he might actually be able to push in. There are not that many remaining siege tanks out for LiquidTaeja, but a Thor actually out as well. And another production round comes in from LiquidTaeja. The Hellions coming in, going to be able to do insane amounts of economic damage to Taeja, but I mean, it's going to be insane amounts of economic damage in comparison to a zero economy situation, and going to end up actually losing all of these Hellions. I'm not sure if this is going to work out very well for 4GG. He's actually down to just 3 of these Hellions now in comparison to just the remaining army that still exists for Taeja. And Taeja dropping Marines and Marauders on top of the army of 4GG, just picking off whatever units he can, and now we see Taeja moving in with the Marines, with the Marauders, with the Thor, going to be able to clean up all of those siege tanks, and that's definitely going to cause a GG coming out of 4GG in just a couple of minutes, as we see the remaining army for 4GG is just getting taken out one by one, position out of position. And 1 Banshee really left over for 4GG. That's pretty much it. 1 siege tank, 1 Banshee, 1 Hellion, and yeah, that's going to cause GG, so very well played by both these players, but it looks like LiquidTaeja taking game number 5 at Dreamhack Valencia 2012 Finals. So congratulations to him, 3-2 victory, and also congratulations to MilleniumForGG. I mean, making it to the finals, basically losing the ace match in the finals is nothing to be ashamed of. He still gets a fabulous prize for 2nd place. And yeah, wow, just a really fantastic series. So thank you so much to everyone that decided to tune in. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this series, as I really did enjoy casting Dreamhack Valencia. Unfortunately, I did get a little bit behind on where I actually wanted to release these casts. If you have been tuning into them relatively soon after they actually were coming out. But, you know, I will try and be a little bit more prompt about releasing those casts on a more consistent basis. But, you know, enough out of that. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hopefully you guys do enjoy my commentary in any capacity whatsoever. And if you do, please go ahead and click that like button. And if you have any comments that you'd like to leave, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. And yeah, it also helps me out if you do decide to subscribe. It lets me know that there are some people that actually do want to watch my casting, which is always a nice little warm, fuzzy feeling inside of my little heart. But yeah, and oh, very important also, go ahead and submit your replays that you want casted over to feardragon64@gmail.com. That's feardragon64, just like my YouTube channel, at gmail.com. And also, go ahead and subscribe to me on Twitch TV. That's twitch.tv/feardragon64. I don't actually do a lot of streaming right now, but oh, you guys, I am actually going to be getting a new motherboard and a new CPU that's going to just completely up my current system right now. So really going to be looking forward to that, and that's actually going to mean a lot more streaming out of me, potentially a lot more events, just depending on how much time I have. That'll be a nice situation where my streaming won't be limited so much by my computer. It'll be more limited by how much time I have to actually stream. And hopefully you guys will enjoy that. But in the meanwhile, please go ahead and check out the underrated team link, which I'm casting for. That's the URTL. There are events for it on teamliquid.net. And yeah, there are games going on Monday through Friday, generally around 7 o'clock or 9:30 Eastern. Yeah, 7:30 and 9 o'clock. Sorry, 7 o'clock and 9:30 Eastern PM. So yeah, I generally will be casting for that on Tuesday and Thursday, but you know, sometimes I will end up casting some of those other days. So please go ahead and check that out. You can check that out at twitch.tv/URgaming and also youtube.com/UR, I think it's URGamingTV is the YouTube channel. So there are a ton of casts that I have up there, and I'm generally co-casting with other people. So please go ahead and check those out, as that is actually where I'm spending a lot of my time in terms of casting. That's a lot of the reason why I'm being so delayed on all these other casts. But I've kept you guys here long enough. Thank you so much for tuning in, and hopefully you guys will decide to tune in again for the next series that we end up casting. Probably going to be casting some games from actually Liquid C, the old Kesva Brood War player that recently joined Team Liquid, so be on the lookout for that. And that's enough out of me. Thank you so much for tuning in, guys. I will see you guys next time.